Um, and so I was a friend and I was a fan, and then as I got a little older and was playing with Luther and Cody Dickinson, which is a whole other story I'm sure we're going to get into, but we wound up playing with him. Well, I played with a few gigs with him before that happened, just as a sub bass player. And then we wound up playing with him for, I want to say, like a year and a half or two, which was, kind of really heavy dream come true. And I was really overwhelmed and often nervous, and I played horribly. Like, all the bass playing I played with him was really bad because I was very intimidated and very nervous. And I wish so bad that I could do it now, because I would just play and be happy and just groove with it. But at the time, I was really nerded out and in awe and hero worship. And then once that was over, I think I played like a clinic or two with him and this master drummer named Jeff Sipe. And yeah, a lot of that stuff's on YouTube, and you can see I'm just so rigid and scared. I cringe watching that stuff. But yeah, it had a huge, huge influence on my guitar playing.
Awesome. Okay, can you talk a little bit about how your relationship with Steve Selvage was born? Because I'm actually interviewing him tomorrow. And how y'all began making music together, how that started.
He is a similar story to the way that I met the Dickinsons, although I met the Dickinsons through Steve. But my dad was a recording engineer at Ardent Studios, and Sid Selvage, Steve's father, was working there. I'm not sure on what, but the dads got to talking. My dad and his dad were like, we should really have our kids meet. And I remember meeting Steve in the atrium at Ardent, and honestly, and he'll tell you the same thing, but he was just a hood rat, just like kind of shagged out, long hair, and like a jean jacket, and just like, in my mind, was a bit of a thug. But somehow we got to talking, and I guess barely had enough of that, like, hey, we're both second generation musicians, we should hang out.
Yeah.
I remember the summer between 6th and 7th grade, he came over to my house, and I played him a bunch of my songs. I use the term songs loosely. I mean bad, like cheesy, like anus-bearing, like bad songs, But like, he listened, and I think we skated a bit, and that was about it. But then I started Snowden that year in 7th grade, and he was in 8th grade. So we'd see each other. We didn't really run in the same circles. And then in high school, we were in jazz band together, which was I'm sure he would say the same thing, but that was another really important part of my learning. I guess I kind of forgot to mention that part in terms of what I was saying earlier, but this Dr. Bill McKee, one in junior high, Jim Holcomb, who wound up being the superintendent of music or whatever for Memphis City Schools. But I learned a lot there, and Steve and I were in jazz band together, and we wound up forming one of my first real bands. I had skate bands that played like kind of off-brand punk rock, like straight edge music, went through the phase with the X's on my hands. And we had those bands, I had those bands with a few of my friends. To be fair, those were probably some of my quote-unquote first bands. But my first band that was really playing out was with Steve, and we were called Oversoul. And that was with a guy named Tom Spolin and a drummer named Mike Tools. Tom Spolin was the other guitar player. He was from New York. He was older than us. I think he was in his 30s at that time. And Tom also taught me and Steve a whole lot about music. There's the Tom chord, which Steve and I both still use to this day. And if I hear him playing it, I'll look over and we'll laugh. It's just what it is. But yeah, that was a huge thing. And with Steve, it's interesting. We just have wound up. It's I guess that's just the way that the cards have fallen, is that we somehow always wound up playing music together in various bands. You can just kind of count on it like clockwork. It just comes back around. It's like, oh, we're doing this together again now, sessions or whatever. So yeah, I'm glad of it. We have a sort of he calls it like a musical shorthand, it's just sort of an unspoken thing. I think it's really, that happens when you've been making music with people for that long. We've been making music together for 24 years now. That's kind of a thing,
That's awesome. So you've talked a little bit about the Dickinsons, but what was your relationship like with Jim Dickinson, and how did you get to know him?
It was the same situation. My father was a recording engineer on a Albert King session that was going on at Kiva, which is now House of Blues, and Jim was the producer, and they had been like, we've got to get our boys together. So I heard about them, and we tried to kind of hook up for a while, but I saw them like on a Channel 5 news story or something. And bearing in mind that I, in my own mind, I just had refined taste of a Midtown city slicker, and they just looked redneck and crazy, and they were like in their barn, and I was like, no way I'm playing with those awful, just like hillbilly podunk country musicians. No way. Like, I'm not into that. And, years later, Jim, I realized that Jim basically wore what he called redneck camouflage. It was to dissuade cops and to dissuade people who wanted, sick him for any sort of reason.